Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to recap all the kind of concepts we've gone through creating an example, a very small and simple project, which is going to be this very basic image gallery. And I'm going to show you so all the concepts I've talked about so far, how to kind of use those to actually build something, what those concepts actually look like in context, and to kind of reinforce the ideas and um, the kind of understanding that I've covered so far. And so, yeah, just to reiterate what those concepts were that we've covered that have been covered so far. So I talked about how in React we render out HTML inside of JavaScript functions, which are called components, and how that allows us to use JavaScript inside of our HTML. And so we can kind of render JavaScript variables inside of HTML and do JavaScript setup in order to make our HTML easier, cleaner, less code. I also talked about how we can split up our components into subcomponents, and those components can be rendered by other components, and how we can also pass data between components using these things which are called props. And so all of those concepts are going to come together and they're going to help us build this image gallery. So what do we need to build this image gallery? Well, first of all, we need a heading and a description, subheading. So let's start with that. So let's get rid of all this stuff from the previous videos that we no longer need. Just start with our basic app component. So first thing we need is a heading, image gallery, and our website description. Welcome to React tutorial image gallery. So I've got that running here. So this is my live changes. So what next? So let's take this one step at a time, and we can just think about one of these gallery items. So what does it have? So we have a image, we have a heading, sort of mini heading, and then we have a fact about the animal. So what does that need? So this is kind of standard HTML. We can put that in a div because we want to kind of group it. We have a mini heading, which is the animal's name. So we have the image above it, so we need an image, which needs a source, and then we can have our description underneath. So I've already got these images saved in my project, and we can copy the text from here. Cool. So let's see how that looks. So yeah, so the image is pretty massive, so we need to add some styles to this. I haven't yet in this series talked about how to do styling in React, so don't worry too much about this bit because I will cover this properly in a later video. But just for now, just so that this image gallery is actually something you can look at. I'm just going to add this inline styles. Cool. So that's looking much better. So that's adding one gallery item. And up till now, that's kind of pretty standard, like just adding HTML inside of a React function, React component. Nothing here that you couldn't do with normal HTML. But the next bits we're going to see really the power of React and how React helps us. Because so if we wanted to add another element, another gallery item, So obviously the gallery item also has an image and a heading and a description. So obviously we could, copy and paste that, and we could add in, all this stuff manually like that, which is cool. That would work, no doubt. Yeah, I need to. So I need to wrap this, and let's display flex this. So yeah, that would work. But let's just add a margin. Yeah, so that works. Oh, margin right, not on the image. So yeah, again, that works. But with React, we can actually do this in a much easier way. Whenever you see code identical repeated, that should trigger in your head, put it inside of its own component and reuse the component. So this is where subcomponents and reusing components, this is where this concept now comes into play. When we see code that's repeated, even if some elements of it are slightly different, remember, we can put this into its own component and then we can pass in any data that needs to be different using props. So let's do that. So we're going to copy this. So return that. We're going to delete all of this and render. So remember, when you make a component, see we've got separated component, so it's its own function. We give it a name. I can't remember if I mentioned this in the other video, but the name of your component has to start with a capital letter. That's the other one of the rules of writing components. Your components have to have, it's so React, like the React library knows that it's a component. You just need to give it a capital letter. So we give it a name, and then to render that, i.e. for our components HTML to be displayed on our page, we need to write it as a custom HTML tag. So now we've got the elephant gallery item, but we wanted elephant and we wanted lion. So how do we do that? Everything that in this component that needs to be different, we need to pass it down via, if you remember, props. So this is the last video, the previous video I talked about passing data. Everything that changes we need to pass it down. So let's make this no, let's make this whole link image link. And description. So everything here that we want to tweak, and it's only 3 things, we will pass it as props for every single time that we want to have a version of this component. And so all of this code, is now being saved. We don't have to write it again. All we have to do is pass the data here. So remember, the way that we pass in data, so the way that we pass these through is where we render this component, where we create it as a custom HTML tag, we have to add its attributes. So just that data that we had inside of these, we just have to add it here. Click on image link equals And so, what is it? Description equals, let's get that again. Cool. So elephant there again. There's the capital. And then we do the same here. Just copy that. So name is lion. Image lion.jpg. Then we copy this text. There you go. So now we've saved having to copy all of this code every single time. We just have to have an instance of this for every single image. And now you can imagine, because we want to have 6 images, I think, or 5. 5 gallery items. This becomes way easier. We don't have to copy and paste all this. So it's cleaner, it's easier, it's nicer. So let's just fill out the rest of this. So we have a buffalo, we have a deer, and we have a bee. And let's copy all these. Cool. There you go. That is a gallery, image gallery. Pretty nice to not have to have so much repetition. Obviously we have to make an instance of this component, but that's the only repetition. The only repetition is this. But as you can see, this is kind of very, it's very clear, right? Also because of the name, gallery item, it's very clear that this is kind of an instance of the gallery item, and we don't really need to see all the implementation details. And again, I mean, this is this is obviously a pretty simple component anyway. This is just an example, but you can imagine if this had much more code, much more HTML, how much lines of code we could be saving and how much cleaner our component could be by being able to use these reusable components and pass the data through props. So there's one more thing I want to cover in this video, just to kind of show off a bit more the power of JavaScript and why having our HTML inside JavaScript functions and being able to use JavaScript, with our HTML, or use that JavaScript to give us a rendered HTML, why that can be so useful and so powerful. And so I'm going to make this actually even cleaner. This is a bit of outside of the scope of what I've taught so far, so don't worry about necessarily understanding how I came up with this or understanding all of the code. This is just a bonus bit just to kind of demonstrate why JavaScript and HTML go so well together in this kind of format. And so this is, like I said, it's cool that we have to repeat all of this code, but it's a little bit inconvenient to have to hard code all of these name, image link, description, because for example, every time we want to add a new one, we have to kind of type it out. And also, like I said, we've repeated this gallery item, so this bit has been repeated, even though we're trying to reduce the repetition. There is a way that you can actually avoid having to repeat gallery item, and it's through using JavaScript. And so again, don't worry too much if you don't understand this, but we can actually create an array of all of this, all of the so if we create an array of objects and an object for each item, we can actually loop over that array and render gallery item. So we only have to write gallery item once, and basically in the loop we say for each element in the array render gallery item with, and then we'll pass in the name, the image link, and the description from the object. So basically what I'm saying is we have an array of objects. So object 1, I'll just copy this, get rid of the equals. Right, so object 1 has a name, image link, description that corresponds to the elephant. Object 2, the lion. Right. Oops. Copy that. Etc. Just do all these. And then the B. Copy. So we have this object. I'm just gonna get rid of these. So now we have all this stored in this array of an array that contains objects inside of it. And so actually what we can do is we can map over using JavaScript. Let's say rendered gallery item equals gallery items.map. So if you know about JavaScript ES6 map functions, they basically, the map function will iterate over this array, and you can pass that function and it will return something for each element. So so the function, we'll call it item and we will return our gallery item. And now name, image link, and description. Actually we get those from item.name. So item.name, item.imagelink, item.imagelink, item.description, item.description. And then this, we can just put that array. So actually you can render an array of components, and it will just render all of those. So now refresh this. This is still working perfectly. So actually now we don't need to write gallery item 5 times. We put our data in a JavaScript array, and then this, I mean, if you really wanted to, clean up this more, you could either take this out of the component, because it doesn't necessarily need to be inside the component because it's still in scope from the JavaScript file. So now your function just looks like that, and that's really clean. I mean, that's really, really minimal code, very clean, very simple, straightforward. right? Very low repetition. And so that's the power of JavaScript in React. Having your HTML in JavaScript functions, that's what you can do. Which is an example of what you can do. You can do so much, and we'll go into that more and more in this series. But that was just to give you, to demonstrate just one example of that.